Jazakallah khairan again for this invitation. I'm so very happy to be with you guys today. For those who don't know me, indeed, my name is Linda and I'm from Finland originally. I have been studying and living previously in Germany, but since 2014, I'm here in Turkey, in Istanbul. I'm a PhD student, and my PhD thesis focuses on Islamophobia in my country, in Finland. And yeah, I mean, alongside of my PhD studies, I have been working here at the university. I'm also the General Secretary for the European Forum of Muslim Women. That's also a voluntary position. So we are all, you know, we have this common ground of voluntary work for the sake of the community. And bi'ithnillah, we all are going to be able to do something good for our brothers and sisters. And yeah, I think that's all about it, about myself, my humble self. So basically, this is one of the most difficult questions I'm always faced with, especially also when I'm writing research. This is partly for the fact that while I personally find it important, on one hand, to have Islamophobia defined in a very similar official manner as anti-Semitism, for example, has been defined in Europe, so that official institutions such as the EU, the European Union, and national legislations could recognize that definition as a basis for their policy. On the other hand, I also see that discussions that delve around any definition or its legitimacy kind of divert our attention from the manifestations of Islamophobia, which at this very moment, all the way from Finland, all the way to China, is harming Muslim citizens in various ways. But I can say that the definitions that I personally have preferred to use for my own work, they have changed over time. You see, there are scholars of Islamophobia studies or social sciences in general who, you know, they deal with Islamophobia only from a cognitive perspective, while others also consider its historical connections to Orientalism and to colonial histories, and hence the ways in which Islamophobia nowadays is embedded as a discriminatory paradigm in society structures, and it is deeply enrooted in discourses, like any other forms of racism are. So when I was a new researcher, I started my work on Islamophobia around, that must have been like 2000, wait a minute. Yeah, 2015, 2016. So when I was new in the field, I associated with Islamophobia only these very concrete actions of hate speech or hate crimes that were directed towards Muslims, be it then in the form of media discourse, political speech, or everyday violent attacks. But then when I read more and I learned more about the subject, and especially while I was also authoring the country chapters on Finland for the European Islamophobia report, I understood that that it's very important to look deeper into the power structures of states and look into how Islamophobia is actually embedded in them as a solid form of racism, that it basically it's used in order to exclude Muslims as a population group from resources, from citizen rights, and they are denied recognition within this whole identity of a constructed we, basically. That's my definition. I mean, it's not like I can't give like a definition that goes like from A to Z basically, but I just wanted to explain to you guys like the different aspects of definitions in general as well. But generally I can say that the case in Finland is very much the same as in many other European countries. Muslims obviously started to feel a specific art of hatred and harassment after 9/11. Which actually also, like 9/11 in general, has been during the past 10 years or so named this starting point of Islamophobia in many studies. Like if you read books or articles that deal with Islamophobia in the States or Islamophobia in Europe, oftentimes they started with, oh, post 9/11, this and this, and so on and so forth. However, personally, I don't agree with this. I believe that Islamophobia as an ideology, it has existed throughout the centuries in the European imagination, which is actually marked by this strong sense of white supremacy and this otherization of anything that is non-white or non-Christian for diverse religio-political purposes throughout the history. So, however, there is a study that was conducted in Finland, I think like 4 years ago. So the study reports that after 9/11, indeed, especially Muslims of African descent, and we have a big community of Somali Muslims in Finland, actually. So these Muslims of color, they felt a shift from this blatant race-based discrimination that they used to feel pre-9/11 towards more religiously motivated discrimination and harassment. However, so I told you that we have like this Somalian community in Finland, but I would like to draw your attention, because I safely assume that many of you guys most probably are not like familiar with the history of Muslim minorities in Finland. So I would like to draw your attention to some historical details. So basically, first Muslims who came to Finland or who settled in Finland, they were ethnic Tatars who came to Finland from Russia. So in 1917, Finland gained independence from Russia. We used to be under the rule of Russia, right? But these Tatar Muslims who had already been in the country, they had settled there either as soldiers or as salesmen. When Finland gained the independence, they were allowed to stay in the country, and actually from 1920 onwards, they were granted citizenships. So today, this Tatar minority still exists, and it's a cultural and religious minority, which has congregations, I think, in 3 cities, but it's super small. It's like 600 members. So why am I mentioning this historical detail now? It's interesting because when I was doing my own research on depictions of Muslims in the media, in Finnish newspapers, I found something. And I noticed that the reception of the Tatar minority or Muslims as a minority, it showed like this difference in attitudes between like the attitude of the public and the attitude of the official authorities. So while the authorities, they manifested these positive attitudes, the Tatars were given citizenships, I also found evidence of hostility, which was manifested in the public discourse, and this was already in the late 1880s. Yes, and hence one can trace some similarities of this discourse that was manifested back then in 1880 in Finnish newspapers to the discourse that is nowadays manifested in the newspapers towards Muslim immigrants. So, for instance, there is this one newspaper from 1885, a Finnish newspaper. So in this newspaper, I quote directly from the newspaper, they say about the Tatar Muslims that had come to Finland, and this was prior independence, yes. So the quote goes like this: "Now here have arrived again those Tatars, or whatever they are, who in their foreign language lure people to buy their worthless scrap for multiplied prices. Since trading from door to doors is forbidden, then why a stranger who does not pay taxes should get such a privilege?" So people were obviously, they were annoyed by the fact that these foreigners were, they were doing these trade activities, right? And then there's another newspaper from 1889 who said about the Tatar salesman, or in the newspaper there was a report about Tatar salesmen, and again I quote, "Tatars, however, are still allowed to continue their trading activities to cheat women with their cheap products." And here we go. "They are in any case as nasty as Jews and otherwise brash in their behavior," right? So you can see here also similarities between anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim racism, right? So it can be, yeah, so it can be like established, like in my opinion, it can be established that these negative attitudes towards Muslims per se are not a product of the 21st or the 20th century. Because even though today we are living in this globalized world where ideologies and events have like this transnational impacts and they have this huge breeding ground, Finland was back then already like in the early 19th century just as well connected to international events and politics, and domestic politics were influenced by developments in the Russian Empire, under whose ruling Finland was back then. So I think this was very interesting. And of course, I mean, like there should be like a larger historical research about it. What was actually the nature of this antipathy towards Muslim Tatars back then, you know, like more than 100 years ago. But nevertheless, I still think that these quotes are very interesting to show like all the way back to, you know, back then, before even independence times, that there was Islamophobia in the Finnish public discourse. Okay, so this again is an issue of perspective. Basically, I'm asked this question oftentimes, obviously, because I somehow represent Finnish people and Finland here in Turkey and elsewhere. But the fact is that Finland is doing much better than some other European countries, such as, for example, France, Belgium, Germany, or Austria. If we take as an example the position of Muslim women in the society, their full participation as citizens in the economic, cultural, and social life in these countries that I just mentioned has in the past few years been largely restricted by laws that forbid religious clothing. And I'm sure that many of you have heard of these headscarf bans. So in Finland, this is not yet the case. So we don't have these kind of laws, for instance. Although at the moment there has been discussions, revised discussions actually about whether police officers should be allowed to wear the headscarf on the job, because so far it has not been allowed. So Finland doesn't have these harsh laws against Muslims as such. We have halal meat, we have everybody can wear whatever they want. Also, I would say that the kind of like system of counter-terrorism activities is not as established as it is, for example, in the UK, right? In the UK, the situation is very bad. But I mean, also overall, the Finnish Muslim community has so far been quite well spared of hate crimes targeting minority groups and motivated by these white supremacist thoughts, which was unfortunately the case to a large extent, you know, with this, the last 2020, early 2020 attacks in Germany. There was an attack against immigrants in Germany. And also there was a mosque attack in Oslo, Norway in 2019. So we haven't had these kind of attacks yet, alhamdulillah, and inshallah it will stay like that. But however, I feel that there is still much breeding ground for such hatred, as it is obvious that, for instance, you might remember the perpetrator behind the Christchurch attacks, or the Christchurch massacre. He was internationally very well connected to other white supremacists. And in Finland, these ideologies have been spread, for instance, by an organization that calls itself the Nordic Resistance Movement, and it's quite neo-Nazist in its characteristics. However, I mean, yes, Finnish Muslims are faced with many other instances of Islamophobia, just like in everywhere else in Europe, basically. So you have like these concrete everyday incidents, such as, you know, hate speech in the media, hate speech spread by politicians and in social media, harassment in social media, violent attacks sometimes on the streets. You know, somebody tries to grab your headscarf, or somebody pushes you and verbally harasses you at the same time. So you can actually notice that this was like religiously motivated as an attack, yes. Or there has been also a couple of vandalism cases against mosques, in the sense that, you know, they spray graffiti on the wall, or they come and break windows and that kind of stuff. But if anybody is interested to read more about incidents as such, like what's going on really like on the everyday level, I really would like to you know, direct you to the website of the project called European Islamophobia Report. I authored the country chapter for 3 years on Finland, and after that another person has been doing it, and all the reports are there, you know, free to download without any price, anything, for many countries as well, not just Finland, but other European countries as well. So I mean, these incident level reports, they are there if you're interested in it. The third group, I always like to mention the Tatar Muslims, because they have been, as I told you guys already, there for over 100 of years, and they also define themselves as a very specific group. They have a very strong self-perception. Yes, there is. First of all, of course, as what always comes to Muslims of color, you have, you know, the ethnicity. Like there is the intersectionality, what we call in academia intersectionality of discrimination. So you have like different levels. You have gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sometimes disabilities, sexual orientation. All of these can kind of play together into a whole bundle of discrimination that comes towards an individual person. So Muslims of color, of course, they suffer from the aspect of ethnic racial discrimination as well. However, it's kind of impossible to generalize in terms of what the Islamophobia against convert Muslims goes, but what's observable in terms of perceptions of converts by those who already are Islamophobic, I would say that in the Islamophobic discourse, converts are viewed as foreign once they embrace the religion of Islam, and especially if they start adhering to certain religious dress practices like the hijab, for example. So this is simply because Islamophobia is connected to the understanding of Muslims being inherently different from non-Muslims. So hence, if you have a non-Muslim Finn and you have a Muslim Finn, then, you know, you are the other. Basically, you are the foreign. So convert Muslims are what we call, they are racialized as being part of this racial religious group of Muslims, right? Because when we talk about Islamophobia as anti-Muslim racism, we acknowledge the fact that there is the old racism is gone. The biological racism, we don't even talk about it anymore, but racism nowadays basically is cultural racism, yes? So you take this group of people, Muslims, who are very diverse in their ethnicities and other backgrounds, and you put them into one, and you treat them all as one, and you have like these characteristics for the group that are normally, we would say, in the old racism, in biological racism, you would use these kind of like categorizations. This race is inferior, stupid, backward, this and that, you know? So we have this racial religious group of Muslims, and converts, they are treated as being part of it in the Islamophobic discourse. So they are categorized just in the same way as Muslims of color as the other, and they are hence attributed these similar characteristics that are used to depict them, the Muslims, as inferior in opposition to their non-Muslim fellow citizens. So for example, the shooter of the Christchurch massacre, I read his manifesto, and there was a very explicit, blatant hate expressed toward convert Muslims as well. And he defined converts as traitors, yes? So this is connected to the allegation of when a person converts, or when a person chooses to, accept Islam as their way of living, as their deen, that one basically leaves his or her culture behind upon this conversion. So while we could almost say that, sometimes even we say that, okay, the converts, they lose their whiteness. Yeah, it sounds maybe crazy, but that's how it is, yes. So they are basically discursively excluded from the imagination of us and who we are in this national context of Finland. So they become victimized just the same for a similar kind of hate speech and hate crimes and discrimination as ethnic Muslims do. And it's almost ironic that oftentimes convert Muslims, they report that, for example, somebody might come to them and be like, oh yeah, your Finnish is quite good. Yes, your Finnish is quite good. And then the person is like, yeah, but I'm a native Finnish speaker. I was born and bred here. I'm not an immigrant or whatever. But because they look like Muslims, whatever that even means, they are automatically taken as foreign. Yes. So yeah, that's a little bit, like there is this difference, maybe this difference of losing one's whiteness, being racialized, and being then categorized in this one box to the other. Yeah, this is actually part of my own PhD research, and I'm currently going through my field work materials, my interviews. So this is one of the interesting questions that I deal with. And inshallah, soon I will have some sort of an article come out in an English-speaking publication on it. Okay. So we have to keep in mind with this question that the convert context is, in terms of identity and self-perception, it's peculiar because converts, they get forcibly sucked into this discourse that is concerned about integration and Muslims with an immigration background. Yeah, so this is connected to what I just told you about being racialized, being otherized as foreign, right? So despite the fact that their religious identity as Muslims in Finland, like myself, it has nothing to do with immigration or being a foreign person or whatsoever, or with the question of whether they are willing or ready to integrate into the host society. So you have this bigger narrative, bigger discussions that delve around immigration, integration, multiculturalism, all of that. And then a Finnish person, white Finnish person, let's say, for example, becomes a Muslim and is suddenly sucked into this integration discourse. Yes. So the Muslim community in Finland is heterogeneous, of course, ethnically, linguistically, as well as religiously. So what Finnish converts are faced with is not the questions of whether the culture from which they come from, which is the case for immigrants, can be integrated into the Finnish society, but whether the culture they were born in, and that is the Finnish culture, whether it is allowed to be kept by them, this means that whether these convert Muslims should, and this is by the opinion of the others, still be identifying themselves as Finns, because now they are Muslim, right? So the discourse, it's coming, however, like this, Finnish versus Muslim, all of these things, it comes, however, also from both sides. So on one hand, you have something coming from within the Muslim community, and it puts the converts under pressure not to follow, for example, the ways and the culture of the non-believers, right? But then on the other hand, you have this Finnish anti-Islam discourse, which doesn't even want to allow any kind of chance of negotiation in terms of how to merge lifestyles for those who would want to do so. So the discourse on and about Finnish Muslims and their identities, it's finally about normalization of Islam in Finland, and this is my opinion, yes? So the mere fact that the converts exist there in this space and that they claim their existential space as political actors, as citizens, participating citizens. It prompts the question, what is and who is Finnish? Okay, so the problem is there, and it's twofold also. It's still twofold. So since Finnish convert Muslims, they have been socialized into the religious life mostly by their foreign Muslim partner. And here I'm speaking in majority terms of female converts, although the number of male converts is also on the rise. So they have been socialized in the religious life by their foreign Muslim partners. The tradition and the culture of the partner, it basically has an impact on the way how converts will incorporate lifestyle changes. So the impact is, for instance, in the way of, you follow a certain school of thought, I mean a madhab, yes, or you adopt a certain dress practice in terms of, for example, the headscarf style that is maybe more closer to the style of the women coming from that, from the country of your partner, yes. Yet at the same time, Muslim converts, they feel like there is no contradiction in their lifestyle of being a Muslim and a Finn, albeit on the level of values or not even in visible cultural practices. And this is because they see, the converts, and they see, in contrast to the anti-Islamic discourse, they see that there are these overlapping values of the Finnish culture and Islam as a religious norm of life. So, for example, respect for nature, that is something that many of my interviewees have oftentimes talked about, that, yeah, I mean, in Finnish culture, we have this respect towards nature and so on and so forth. And we find that this is absolutely something that is manifested also under the Islamic values. There is also this aspect of, secularization of convert Muslims, the so-called convert alert, as we say, because the converts, they are seen sometimes as those who delve into the religion very rigidly, and they follow rules strictly, yes, hence they are too much or they are too radical. And even this is sometimes being fueled by a discourse coming from the Muslim community. Yes, oh, those converts, they're so radical. Yes, so, and then of course with the past years with ISIS, we have come to see that converts were represented also at the front lines of the war as recruits or advocates of, whatever. So then what easily happens, as I see it, is that the other motivations, and hereby we acknowledge that the violatization of religion is a problem as such, yes, that these other motivations for a person's conversion, for choosing Islam as a way of life and response to or a way to cope with one's life challenges, they remain absolutely unacknowledged, and hence the voices of the converts about their true selves, basically they remain unheard. So yeah, I think that's I've been talking for a long time. Yeah, I thought about this for a long time because, as you yourself know, we actually got to know each other in the Dawah class in Bahrain. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, okay. So you have, on one hand, you have this whole very structured Dawah methods. I think it's a no joke, to make Dawah to people, and a person has to have knowledge and a person has to know what they're doing. But in my honest opinion, yeah, Muslims, they oftentimes they get into this kind of a mood, yeah, of oh, we have to show people now the true face of Islam, or we have to show that we are not terrorists, and so on, yeah. And while, of course, I fundamentally, I agree with the premise that Muslims should always try to keep in mind that due to Islamophobia, whatever we do, our actions will be judged according to us being Muslims. It is almost like a stigma upon us, yes. Mm-hmm. But why I'm upset about this, it's because this mood, it creates an atmosphere of a double consciousness. yes, in which Muslims, they become so self-aware, so self-conscious that, and this is an example that is based on one of my interviews for my PhD research, that even if you are with your kids outside in the city, you go to the supermarket and your kids are misbehaving, the mother, she automatically starts to think like, oh no, like now everybody's looking at us, and they will say, oh yeah, those Muslims, they cannot even raise their children right, and this and that, you know. And of course she starts to stress about the situation, and her kids are just having a bad day basically, but she needs to at the same time stress about the fact that this situation, her kids being kids, is basically perceived, is analyzed by non-Muslims as something, you know, negative about Muslims as such. Yes. So this is emotionally very exhausting for many people, that you always have to kind of keep your guard, and you have to always kind of, you don't get the chance to be a human like everybody else, you know, just with good days and bad days. So, however, to go back to what I was starting to say, is that at the same time, I also kind of like, I personally think that if Muslim communities in our societies in the West, in Europe, if they constantly strive towards campaigns that kind of humanize, so to say, Muslims, or somehow try to prove themselves to the non-Muslims in the sense of like counter narratives to terrorism or so, I think that's counterproductive. Why? It's exactly what actually Islamophobes they want. They want Muslims, as I see it, they want Muslims to fall into this apologetic mood and be with the, and be very busy with these attempts of talking back, while they could at the same time just concentrate on empowering their communities from within. They could like enhance their political and civic participation in general, and they could just make sure that all members are well educated in terms of Islamic knowledge. So I think that we have to keep in mind that oftentimes non-Muslims, they also ask questions or raise issues with Muslims in a conversation to maliciously corner the Muslim conversation partner, or at least to find confirmation to their own negative opinions. So, for example, increasing Islamic knowledge within the members, it's absolutely essential in terms of like for every Muslim to be able to respond to these kind of situations. But these aspects that I just noted, you know, civic and political participation, empowerment of communities, increasing of knowledge, these are very necessary bases for dawah work, in my opinion. If the community doesn't have the necessary knowledge and the tools to make dawah in a manner that would be well structured or content-wise appropriated to the local context, it is better to make sure just that every Muslim keeps an eye on themselves and on their own actions. Yes, while you just live your normal life and you make sure that you are contributing to the well-being of the society at large. And that's it. That's my opinion about that. Of course, you guys are so far away, but nevertheless, we are close. I'm not sure if we will ever be able to really stop Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred as an ummah. Yes, I'm a little bit pessimistic about it, if you excuse me, especially when financial and political interests and these issues of maintaining power positions are involved. Yes, because remember, I also, Yani, when I talk about Islamophobia, I'm not just talking about stereotypes, misconceptions. These are something that on the grassroots level we can work on, yes, but you always have that state structure, you know, that power structure looming over you, and this is where these interests are in play, and this is where Islamophobia also mostly operates. Yes. So the majority groups in the West will or the majority societies in the West, they will mostly probably always be inclined to be looking for scapegoats. So you always have that political kind of, you know, interest in there. And at the moment, Muslims are the scapegoats. It used to be Jews, it used to be communists, but at the moment it's the Muslims. So if Europe, and then there is also the issue of Europe itself and European understanding of what is Europe and what is our identity. So if Europe does not rework the definitions of its own identity, which is still, as I noted before, also for this whole idea of national identities, it's very solidly based on the understanding of Europe at large being white, Christian, yes. This anti-Muslim hatred, it will always continue to be used as a tool for self-identification, for an identity that is restricted to certain religion and race as a remnant from several hundreds of years ago. So what I would like to see, however, I think it's very important, is a shift from the understanding of Islam as an Arab religion. So the Arabization, or even sometimes we call it Turkification of Islam in certain contexts, it has its own consequences in the ways that non-Muslim view Islam. So for the most non-Muslims, it is, for example, unknown fact that the biggest Muslim country is Indonesia, or that there is a even significant history of Islam and Muslim presence that goes way back for centuries in the very heart of Europe. It's in the Balkans, yes? So there is this obsession that Europe and the US also, the West in general, have with Middle East, and it's absolutely politically motivated. So this has, of course, contributed to these misconceptions about Islamic, cultures, Islamic civilization, or Muslims as peoples. And the diversity, there is no diversity in the eyes of non-Muslims in terms of Islamic cultures or Islamicate cultures. So for Malaysians and other, Southeast Asians, I would like to see maybe more activities in Europe on the community level in terms of raising awareness of just cultural activities, maybe somehow, but of course, I also understand that the immigrant communities coming from your countries, it's very small. Yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't think I know any Malays in Finland, to be honest. Yes, most of the Muslims that I know in Finland who have some kind of immigration background, they come from Middle Eastern countries or from the Balkans. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that would be something, that people could do with some sort of exchange, or I really don't know. But if the communities are small, there's also a kind of a dilemma. But embassies could help. So if embassies, for example, could be, very, could be proactive in these kind of programs or something, that would be also great. Inshallah. Now we go hardcore theology. Yeah. Okay. I think it's pretty much, as far as I know, I mean, the discussions that I have had with my convert friends, it definitely is, for the most people, it's the issue with Trinity in Christianity. Many have told me that they couldn't deal with it and they didn't understand it. It's just generally, the God image. That Islam basically gives a very, very clear, it doesn't, you don't need to wonder about like, is here. So yes, so the God image is something that really brings people to Islam. And I have also, I've been lately reading some books on converts in Germany, and there also I found that values as such, many people find that nowadays in the West the societies are so valueless. Yeah, so this whole secularization process has brought it that people are just as if they are swimming in the air and they have nothing to hold on to and nothing to orientate themselves with except capitalism. Yes, so that as well for many is kind of like a way to, you know, have some structure in their lives. Thank you so much. This was my pleasure, and inshallah, after all of this COVID, whatever is over, I really wish to visit your country and see you guys actually face to face. But thank you so much. The audience was great. So many questions, so much engagement in the chat box. This has been absolutely wonderful. I hope that I was able to make sense with whatever I was saying. And inshallah, this has benefited us all.